Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Vasil Sami Khan. I'm the Business Development Executive at ACC Karachi office. Welcome to the first webinar of the series of strategic business leaders bridging the gap webinar series. We are here to support our students and in studying the SBL examination. As you're aware, we are organizing these sessions for all of you. So we are using an integrated 100% case study approach, examining across a breadth of organizational functions. The SBL exam possesses technical and professional skills and capabilities that potential leaders, your future, all of you, need to demonstrate in senior positions when you're working within different kind of organizations. Since the SBL exam is highly practical and most students in Pakistan do not have the right practical exposure when they're going for these exams and at the time of studying this paper. So therefore, NCC has planned these sessions where industry experts are invited to broaden your horizons on the identified topics and help you to appreciate its relevance in the practical world. So today's session is all about public sector governance. We have with us Mr. Mohammad Danish. He's here to share some insights and industry knowledge. He's currently the Director of Finance, Public-Private Partnership Unit with the Government of Sindh, which is based in south of Pakistan. So we are based in ACC Karachi office and we're live from ACC Karachi office. Danish has 13 years of prior work experience in capital markets, financial services sector. He was with Alpha Beam Investments previously. Before that, he was with ICI. So we are here with him, and he has a diversified experience of investment research and evaluation, transaction structuring, or project finance advisory, business strategy and planning, and has a proven track record of delivering consistent and strong results. He's also an ACC member as well. So a few housekeeping instructions before we hand it over to Danish. If you have any questions, please write in the chat panel, and we will answer it right at the end of our session in our Q&A session. In case during the session, if you do not hear the speaker's voice or video, try rejoining the session again. It might be due to your internet connectivity issue. We will be recording the video for this session, and the recording will be shared with all of you after the session within this week or early next week. So I'll be handing it over to Danish now. He'll be taking you through a brief presentation on public-private partnerships in Sindh. So Danish, can you take over?
Thank you so much, Vasil. Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I am Mohammad Danish, working as Director of Finance at PPP Unit, Government of Sindh. I will briefly explain my role at PPP Unit in the start. That I am working on different PPP projects and leading the team of Government of Sindh in different sectors, including transport, road projects, and health PPP initiatives, and also PPP projects of industrial development. Basically, we at PPP unit work as buy-side advisor to the Government of Sindh, and also we work as secretariat to the PPP Policy Board, which is a governing and approving authority of the PPP projects in Sindh. So I will start with my presentation. Can you please move? Yeah. So initially, I will define the key difference of the objectives and the mechanics of public sector and private sector, how both of them differ from each other. You can see that the dimension strategic objective, which is for which private sector, it is maximization of shareholder wealth. I believe you would have studied in the financial management course that the basic objective or long run objective of the private sector organization is to maximize the shareholders' wealth, and the management is working on the same objective. At public sector, you can see that the 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 strategic objective of setting up a government entity or a government department is not maximization of wealth or profit of the profit for the government. It is basically economic development, uh, the work or services which can provide benefits to society, just a social benefit, and to formulate and devise policy for optimal distribution of wealth in the economy, which is basically the taxation system. The second parameter is financial objective, which is actually the tactical objective at a lower stage of the strategic objective. For private sector, it is profit making. On yearly basis, it runs the business to make profit. While okay, I'm sorry, it's the private sector. It is so the third column is actually public sector. I believe it's my mistake. I apologize. So the public sector's financial objective is to safeguard the public money, like uh, they procure and they engage in the activities where the public money is invested, and their final objective or financial objective is to safeguard public money, which is basically investing and making expenditures in the activities where uh, public money could be safeguarded. The indirect meaning of that is actually value for money. Like if government is planning, if the government plans to build a road, for example, it will build the road. It will buy the services of the private party in the manner where efficiency, effectiveness, and third E is can be achieved. The third parameter is governing framework. You can see that you would have studied in your previous examinations that companies are run under companies rules or ordinance. In Pakistan, it is companies ordinance. There is a code of corporate governance which governs the basic activities of the companies. Uh, uh, there are income tax laws, sales tax laws in every country, and the private sector organizations are governed under these laws. There are industry-specific frameworks as well for different organizations, like an asset management company could be governed by mutual fund association, mutual fund and non-banking finance rules. And there are other applicable laws and rules which governs the state of affairs of the private sector companies. While you can see that public sector are governed by at the upper level, it governs by the constitution. Then there are rule of doing business, public procurement rules, and other applicable laws or rules or laws are governed. About institutional structure, private sector entities have twofold management layer. The first is board of directors who work on behalf of the shareholders, and management is the second layer which operates day-to-day basis operation matters. In the government, you can see that there are certain ministries run in the government, and under them, the bureaucrats or government officers run the day-to-day business. And there are certain committees for projects or procurements which are notified by the government. So these are actually the main differences between public sector and private sector and their objectives and their operational matters. So, so there is a new concept in public procurement. There is first I would like to briefly explain how the government as a government or public sector engages private sector in a traditional procurement. In traditional procurement, the government gives a contract to a private sector on engineering, procurement, and commissioning method, which is called EPC method. In EPC method, there is no risk transfer to the private party. But in the last 40, 50 years, or maybe 100 years, uh, there is a new method of public procurement innovated by different government organizations across the globe, which is called public-private partnership. So I would like to define public-private partnership in a manner. There is no actually universal definition of public-private partnership. There are certain key elements which define that the arrangement is public-private partnership. The first one is there is a contract between public party and private party, and the contract is to give the development of an infrastructure or a service delivery to the private party. This is the first element, and then the second element is that there is a risk allocation to the risk transfer to the private party. There are certain ways where the risk can be transferred to the private party. Uh, the biggest or the most common method is to get the finance of the private of the project done by the private party. There is a concept of capital at risk, which is inherent in a public-private partnership deals. When the private party invests its money in the project, it becomes a shareholder or it becomes an owner of the project, and their capital is at risk when the project is implemented. So if the capital of private party is at risk when the project is implemented, the private party gets responsible for the service delivery. So it has to provide the service as per the required levels. If it requires its invested money, return on invested money. Okay, so the most common or comprehensive method of PPP is to transfer the design, construction, financing, operation, and maintenance of a project. And usually PPPs are long-term contracts of more than 10 years, 25 years, 30 years. So this is the commercial concept of PPPs, that you get the finance of the public-private partnership project by the private party and keep its capital at risk. So private party gets most responsible, and its payments are linked to its performance. If it perform according to the required benchmarks and standards, it will get paid the return on its investment. Otherwise, it will not get paid, and the project will fail, and the government will not have major consequences because the private sector has already invested its money. So if you can see the diagram in this slide, the public sector required services, private sector provides the service delivery, and the public sector in return pays it to according to its performance. So this is basically the structure of a PPP. So you can move to the next slide. Okay, there are certain benefits of doing a project in PPP. These benefits are not exhaustive, and these benefits will not be a case in every project actually. So there are certain elements which through which government gets benefits. First one is the private sector has uh, special skills or specialties, and they have innovative ideas to do certain things which public sector cannot do, or which public sector does not have capacity to do. So the first benefit is to get efficiency in the projects and innovative ideas of the private sector, and their engagement uh, will benefit the government in these sense. So uh, the third point is that while value for money is gauged by combining whole life cost and quality, the whole life cost and quality defines how the project will run, and government uh, calculates the value for money at inception and at the time of procurement of services of the private party, and uh, it can it calculates actually the value for money which can be provided by PPPs, which are not available in the traditional procurement method. Okay, so there are certain risks which are transferred to the private party in PPPs. There is no concept of risk transfer in the traditional mode. So that is why PPPs are more favorable for government. Uh, the last point is payment is linked to performance. See, in the traditional procurement of the government, the performance is not linked to as such linked to the private party's performance, and they get paid by the time or the delivery of the asset without assessment of the quality or uh, required quality of the asset.
Also, on assessment is also done.
Yes, and in PPPs, they construct the asset, they maintain the asset, and they operate the asset through the life of the asset. So, if a road is built, then they construct the road, they maintain the road quality throughout the 30 years period, and uh, they operate the road as well, and they transfer the road at the end of the considered term to the private party at in most of the cases without any cost, because they have get their return in the 30 years time period. So performance based payment is the main quality of PPPs, which is not evident in the traditional procurements. So we can move. This is the actually risk allocation matrix of a typical PPP project. You can see that in conventional procurement, most of the risks are taken by the government, which are highlighted in blue, which are colored in blue actually. So in conventional procurement, private sector is only responsible for design and construction. If uh, they are not responsible for service provision, they are not responsible for maintenance, renewal, and quality of service. They are not responsible for even residual value or volume of the users who will use it. And while you can see that in PPPs, design and construction is also here the responsibility of the. However, the service provision, maintenance, quality of service, they all are the responsibility of the private party. Also, you can see that force majeure, oscillations, residual value, and volume, these risks are also shared. These are not the risks allocated to government only. So you can see that the PPPs offer optimal risk allocation uh, in the PPPs. However, it is a fact, and international studies also suggest that because in PPPs all risks are built in and they are allocated to they are allocated according to the capacity of the private party and public party. The PPPs are essentially pricely, even costlier than the public procurement, conventional procurement, because you have studied that the risk and return trade-off suggests that if the risk is higher, then the price or return is higher. So in PPPs, the project is optimally allocated. The project risks are optimally allocated, but the price is higher for PPPs because of this reason. So There are certain types of doing PPP. The most common example is the third one, BOT, build, operate, and transfer. You can see that the traditional procurement is only limited to procurement of assets by the public sector using conventional funding. However, in public-private partnership, the funding is mainly arranged by the private sector. And there are certain types which are mentioned here: build, lease and transfer, build, operate and transfer, build, operate and operate. So these all are basically the types of PPPs. The most the most common is build, operate and transfer, and based on the nature and dynamics of the project, these types are selected. For example, if we outsource an hospital, a public sector hospital, to a private party, the most appropriate method would be management contract or service contract. And if the government plans to build a road or build an infrastructure, other type of infrastructure, the most appropriate could be build, operate, transfer, or build, own and operate. These are varieties actually. So traditional procurement is actually owning the asset and owning the project by itself. And public-private partnership, in public-private partnership, these assets are owned by the private party during the term of the concession only. After the concession term, the asset is transferred to the government. In privatization, the public sector transfer the ownership of the asset in indefinite terms. So these are three methods where government can hire the service of the private party, and people normally mix PPPs with privatization. So you can see that the difference between the privatization and public-private partnership is the term of the transferring of the ownership. Yes. I believe the students have studied industry life cycle in any of the course. Okay. So PPP projects have also a project life cycle. We in the first phase we usually do the need assessment or feasibility study of the project. For example, government intends to build a road between cities. First of all, the feasibility study would be carried out, and it would suggest whether there is a genuine need of the road or not, and what would be the social and economic benefits of the of that project. So these activities are done in the feasibility study.
Also, previous current traffic.
Yes. Okay. Then basically, in social and economic benefits. For example, for this slide I use the road example, and feasibility study, the consultants or the government itself will identify how much the traffic will require this road, and what would be the traffic size on daily basis, and who will commute through this road, and what would be the economic benefits. For example, there may be certain goods or things which would be transported through this road.
Yes, agriculture.
Okay. So these all activities, so these all studies will be done in the need assessment, which is the first phase. Government usually does this exercise through their advisors. So government actually acquires advisors or consultants, and they do the feasibility study and option appraisal on behalf of the government. In the second, after doing feasibility, the advisors and the government builds a transaction structure, which is basically how the deal would be made and how the project would be given to a private party. There are certain transaction structures which I can explain later on. Uh, uh, Basically, the the final outcome of this exercise at phase 2 is value for money analysis. The value for money analysis suggests whether the uh, whether the whether this project will provide value to the government as compared to if the project would have been done under the traditional mode. So basically in VFM analysis or value for money analysis, the government calculates the additional value which can be driven through PPP. Okay, so after completion of phase 1 and phase 2, and if the project looks viable, then the government enters into the tendering process and procures and procures the services of the private party. There are certain private partners, private sector entities bids in the tendering process, and one of them wins the project. And then in the section, in the phase 4, contract is awarded and the contract is signed between the public sector and private sector, and the project enters into the implementation phase. There are certainly stages in every project. In a normal project, there is a construction term of more or less 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Then there is an O&M, operation and maintenance term, of at least 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And the final phase is the contract termination at the end of the term of the project. Okay. So, also in the financial management course, you would have studied the concept of SPV, a special purpose vehicle. In PPP projects, mostly there is an SPV. There is an SPV created for the project. The SPV is created by the winning bidder, the private party. They form a separate company, a new company for the project, specifically for the project, and puts in its equity in the company and may borrow the money from the bankers as well, and then it runs the project. So there are certain agreements which SPV or the project company enters with the different parties. Like with the lender, it will get the finance documents or financing agreements. For there will be an agreement between the equity shareholders, which is called shareholder agreement. With the government, the main concession agreement is signed. With the construction and maintenance contractors, they execute construction and operation maintenance agreements. So all the activities of the project is run by the project company, and the project company is actually the private party of the PPP project. Okay, so now I come to, after explaining the PPPs, now I come to what we have done in SIM. We have done 9-10 projects in SIM under the PPP umbrella. The 9 departments are works and services, health, mainly education. There are, you can see that the main, most of the projects are related to roads and contracting out of or outsourcing of health and education facilities. So there are certain private parties and their operation dates are also given. So government sin has started its PPP regime in 2008, and the first PPP the PPP unit was formed in 2010. Though in the 10 years time we have done so far 9 projects, but the pipeline is much bigger. The PPP projects are usually implemented in a long time actually, because there is much time needed for feasibility and to do the procurement and assessment analysis. That is why, and we actually in Pakistan, the PPP unit scene is the first PPP unit or PPP authority in Pakistan, and we in Pakistan we were actually the PPP, the concept of PPP is actually was very new for us. So understanding the mechanics of the PPPs was a very long exercise. I think the first project, which is Hyderabad Mirpur Khas, uh, uh, was awarded to the private party after the 5 years of the inception of the PPP Act or PPP unit. So when you PPP Act actually is the policy, or PPP Act is the framework through which PPP projects are governed in Sindh. When the government makes any policy or framework, it has to provide the enabling environment or conducive environment for the players of that sector. In PPPs, I visualize there are four key pillars which are required in the framework and also in the operational procedures to streamline the PPP projects. The first pillar is regulatory framework itself. So government, in this slide, I have tried to show what we have achieved, and on the basis of what we have done 9 or 10 projects so far. In the regulatory framework, Sindh was the first province to enact the law, and the multinational MDBs have supported us well, including Asian Development Bank and World Bank, who assisted us in making the PPP Act. There is a dedicated part in same public procurement rules for PPP projects. There is no such example in anywhere else in Pakistan. Uh, so our regulatory framework is very stringent and strong, which provides opportunities for private parties, and actually it gives it gives the way to execute the PPP projects. The second pillar is institutional capacity, which is actually the role of the governance and the role and the capacity or skills required to execute PPP projects. The first, at the highest level, there is a PPP policy board, which is led by Chief Minister of Sindh, and we have meeting of the PPP policy board every month or after every month. So the PPP policy in the PPP policy board, which is chaired by the CM of the province, you can imagine how strong and how authoritative it could be. So when we have to when we have to get approval of any project, so we move the case to the PPP policy board, and PPPs are actually the complex deals. You need finance or corporate finance professionals, you need legal professionals, and you need the technical skills of the employees to who can understand the PPP projects. So in the PPP unit, Government Sindh has hired professionals from market. I myself is ACCA. We have MBAs, we have legal experts in our team, and we have civil engineers as well in our team who can understand the projects. There are PPP nodes in different departments, and they also have legal and technical experts and finance experts as well. So the third pillar is public financial management, which is actually done by government through enacting or enacting a dedicated fund for funding for the PPP projects. There is also a dedicated fund which is called PDF for funding of the consultancy fees. So there is a new company which has been formed with the assistance of ADB, which is PSF, and this is a joint venture of government and ADB to execute the PPP projects in Sindh. We have also developed streamlined administrative procedures, which is the fourth pillar, including monitoring of the private party's performance through an independent third party, and payment of the private party through escrow accounts means government has no access to the payments of the private party, and private party does not have to come to the government to ask for his payment, because it will create administrative burden and as well as the element of corruption can accumulate. So, for to do away these difficulties, we have made the payment through escrow bank accounts. So, based on these four pillars, Economic Intelligence Unit Asia Infrastructure, in its report in 2019, ranked PPP units at 6th best performing PPP unit in Asia, and the most appreciating thing for us is that the ranking was actually for countries. So they specifically select two states in Asia. One is from India, Gujarat, and the second is Sindh from Pakistan, based on their basically these four pillars. Okay. So, as the concept is new, and definitely when you do something good or when you do something new or challenging, you can face different challenges or difficulties. So, I have actually laid out different challenges we have been facing and what are the mitigation strategies we can adopt or which we have already been adopting. The first one is related to governance, and it particularly pertain to phase one. Like there is no policy and priority of the government of Sindh to do what is the policy of government, what are the highway policy, what are the policy for health initiatives, what is the policy of education. So basically, projects are selected or identified on ad hoc basis. So there is no particular policy. And also, there are no specific sector-related frameworks. For example, there is a huge potential of doing PPP projects in mass transit or energy, but not energy, mass transit. But government has not formulated any specific policy for these sectors. So the solution is that the government should develop a long run or medium term policy for the sectors and for its provincial economy, and set up sector specific regulatory authorities. I have done a tick mark on the second recommendation because it has just started. Government Sindh has formed regulatory authorities of 2 or 3 departments, but the potential is very much higher. The second challenge is building the institutional capacity. Government Sindh has hired specialists in PPP unit. However, the government different departments, does not have required capacity or required skills of the employees. There is no project screening and selection criteria as such. Uh, we actually screen and select the private parties based on what our subjective type of assessment of the project with the help of advisors. So there should be specific standardized screening and selection criteria, and the government can engage representation from private sector on authorities boards, and also in PPP nodes the government can enhance the capacity of their employees. About market appetite, I mean, there are two types of investors who can come in PPPs. The first one is the developer itself, which is the private party, and the second is the lending market or financial markets. Uh, in Pertaining to engaging the private parties, the government has been successful to a certain extent. However, offering the projects to banks, the government has not been very successful as far. PPB, there are certain elements in the bureaucracy as well, like they depend everything at PPP or PPP. There are no project directors in the government departments. Also, because of the because of the events faced during last 2 years related to accountability events, the government departments have become very hesitant and risk averse to do any project. So these are actually the problems which we have been facing. The suggestions which can mitigate these risks include there should be amendment in the NAB law. Fortunately, we see that NAB has announced an amendment in its law recently. So this has been done, and which further needs improvement. And there is the PSF, which has been formed with the joint venture of Government of Sindh and ADB, could be given extra responsibility because it is run like a private sector entity. So we can transfer risk to that company, and they can hire experts in their team, uh, uh, which can offer good products to the market. So there are also challenges because we were new in the PPP markets. Those were the early days. We work with limited number of advisors and private players and lenders, but we are expanding our market. We we are getting support from multilateral finance institutions. World Bank and Asian Development Bank is continuously collaborating with us on different initiatives and different reforms. Uh, so far, we have done 3 road projects, and Government of Sindh has provided financial guarantees in the projects, which is not according to the true theme of the PPPs actually. But we did this because we have to create the market of PPPs in this here, yeah, in this province. So now we are working with World Bank and Asian Development Bank to to create guarantees based on assets, not based on cash actually. So we are transferring from cash-based guarantees to asset-based guarantees actually. Okay, and we did not have uh, standardized the project agreements when we were starting the PPP unit. But now we have done 10 deals. We have standardized documents. We have very good connection with legal advisors. So the market is actually developing. Advisors are also learning. Government is also learning, and private sector, which is lenders and private parties, are also learning. So we are entering in actually the development phase of this industry, PPP industry. So this is actually the state of PPPs in Sindh, and what are PPPs and what could be done through PPPs vis-a-vis the traditional procurement. I would welcome your questions.
So if anyone has any questions, please type in the chat box so that we can take it up for you before we wrap up the session by 4:30 p.m. So please type in your questions. In the meanwhile, we'll wait for your questions. So then going back to your presentation, I have a few questions as well, so I thought I would raise it with you.
Yes.
So how is the governance structure in each of the stages of the phases that you shared previously? How is the governance mechanism in all the phases that you shared with us?
Governance mechanism.
Yeah, in all of these phases.
Actually, these all activities are done by the department itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Department is in government it is called line agency. Line agency or administrative agency is responsible to do all the activities. PPP unit facilitate them, and PPP unit support them because we have institutional capacity. We have skilled force, skilled people. They actually they are responsible to do the need assessment, but because they do not have capacity, their PPT notes are weak, their skills are not up to mark. So they appoint advisors and they do these almost 1, 2, 3 up to the third phase. They do all these three exercises through their advisors.
Okay.
But the project during the project implementation and performance, they are responsible to directly. They cannot take services of the advisors during the next the last two
Yes.
phases.
Okay. Okay. So, if anyone does not have any questions, can you please type it here? I hope you can hear us as well. I hope the connectivity issue of some people has been resolved now because we've been running it very smoothly so far. If you can hear us properly and if you have any questions, then please do share it with us. Otherwise, we will then wrap up the session if you don't have any questions. So in most of these projects, what was the lead time of completing these phases in some of these projects, for example?
Okay, then I would go to that slide where we are learning anything here.
Yes.
Actually, the first phase takes almost 1 year. Okay, then the second phase takes more or less 6 months or 12 months as well, but it can be done within 6 months. Okay, and tendering process itself takes at least 6 months. So conclusion of third phase, you can see that the time requirement is almost 2 years. The project implementation and performance, that is the separate part. You complete the procurement at the conclusion of phase 3. The phase 4 and phase 5 is actually the O&M phase. or contract management phase actually. So if you start a project, if a department conceives a project today, it will take more or less 1.5 to 2 years to do the procurement completely.
Coming to the contract stage.
Yes.
So mostly for any student who's going to attempt the SBL exam, and if they come across any case studies for government departments, so should they keep in mind that these usually governments in Pakistan or any other global as well, are they fast enough globally? Do you think that public sector is robust in other parts of the world, and how fast or slow are they in these types of contract awarding processes?
Okay.
And project implementations?
We have been given an exam in the last month, which is related to PPPs. It was funded by World Bank, and we were doing that exam. In that exam, we have studied international practices in PPPs, and we have seen that the governments, the phenomena of incapable people and the shortage of capacity at public sector is not only limited to Pakistan and similar countries. It is evident everywhere actually. But of course, their ministries, the developed countries, their ministries and their departments are more educated, and they know the background of the industry or sector in which they are working.
Pakistan has to go for advisors.
Yeah, but the PPP are long. PPP procurement is a very long process. In basically, we have achieved the 2 years time period. After learning a lot, we in few cases we have done these exercises in less than 2 years, and in few cases we did these exercises in more than 10 years. But we have seen in that examination and studies that they in the Western countries or in the developed countries, they do the feasibility study and contract development in very much depth. So they take more time because you cannot in sacrificing if you do these exercises in haste, then you can actually ruin your long run part of the project. Because PPPs are mostly 25, 30 years, 20 years projects. So these exercises are done with much required rigor.
So how is like, for example, a project has been implemented and you are in the phase 4 of the implementation phase. So how is the governance? How is it measured that performance is satisfactory for the private party to you or not?
Okay, the private party's performance starts from the phase 4 actually.
Yeah.
Okay, after the signing of the contract.
Yes.
And we usually state in the agreement that what are the service levels required, what are the KPIs required from the private party.
Yes.
So, and we engage independent third party monitoring and evaluation firm. And usually, in our case, we usually have Big Four audit firms for that. Okay, so the third party evaluates the performance of the private party on periodic basis, for example, on quarterly basis. Then their payments is executed according to their performance. In the main agreement, their KPIs are written, their payments are written.
Okay.
If this is the required level of KPI and they have achieved, they will get paid 100%.
Okay.
If they will achieve less than the required of the KPI, they will get less payments. They will reduction in their payments. So private party is bound, and they have to perform according to the agreement. Otherwise, they will not get paid.
So are the Big Four firms involved in the previous before the performance stage as well in the assessment or in the development of procurement options stage?
In most of the cases, the advisory firm comes in the form of consortium. There are three types of advisors: financial advisor, legal advisor, and technical advisors. Legal advisors are law firms. Technical advisors are dependent on the nature of the project, depending on the project. Financial advisors are in most of the cases we have hired big firms, and in most of the most of our projects we have had understanding in our projects. Translated logically. Zishan.
Yeah. So, just one more question from my end, and then I'll come to the audience questions. Can you explain what are these public-private partnership levels, like BAT, and what is the difference between each of these stages, each of these project types?
Actually, these types are depending on the nature of the project. Like I have given an example earlier, if we are outsourcing in a public sector hospital or an education facility, we would follow management contract or service contract. If we are going to enter in a very long run or a strategic type of project, uh, where government will also be engaged in the project operations, then I believe the joint venture will be a suitable type. There may be greenfield projects. There may be brownfield projects. For a brownfield projects, rehabilitation, operate and transfer, or rehabilitation on and operate
So, what
would
is
be
the
suitable.
difference between greenfield and brownfield?
Greenfield is totally a new project, which was not conceived anywhere, which is not existent. These are actually commercial definitions.
Okay.
Greenfield or brownfield. Brownfield projects is like a road is there is a road which doesn't exist, but we hire private party to rehabilitate it and then operate and maintain it. Then it will not be a greenfield, it will be actually a brownfield project. Yeah, it will be a brownfield project.
So, what is the difference between BTO and BOT, build, operate, and transfer, and build, transfer, and operate? You mentioned build, operate, and transfer, and build, transfer, and operate. So, what is the difference between these two?
Build, operate, transfer is the plain vanilla transaction, or I have to understand what is BTO. Build, transfer, and operate.
Transfer and operate.
I'm not recalling any example at the moment. Maybe a type of.
Okay. So, not an issue. We have a few audience questions as well. Can you share PPP project success stories and performance in other countries apart from Asia? Mr. Shaukat is asking this question.
Okay, PPPs actually there are certain examples. There are many examples actually, which are the success stories of PPPs. Australia has done a large number of PPP deals. UK has done South Africa and Colombia. India has done a number of PPP deals. जो सिडनी में हुई नहीं मार्ट जो बिल्डिंग बनी है इसका नाम Sydney Harbour is actually a PPP deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very old, I think.
Yeah. So actually, it will not be a PPP deal as per their original contract, but the mechanics suggests that it is a PPP. Yeah. वो जो है ना रेन वाटरफॉल है वो कौन सा है बहुत मशहूर है
US?
नहीं in UK they have done railways and transport projects in PPPs which are very successful projects actually. So there are many examples actually.
Okay, great. So what is the difference between the investment by a public listed entity and investment by the public sector? What is the difference between its investment purposes?
Okay, a public listed entity.
Yeah.
Public listed entity is actually a public limited company, and by the name, which is suggesting that it is a public listed, it does not mean that it will be a sector entity. Public limited company is actually a company which can be owned by a private sector entity, which can be owned by private sector shareholders. So investment by public and investment by public sector and public sector.
And investment by the public sector.
So actually, public listed entity is not per se a public sector entity. It is a private. It could be a semi. It could be a public. It could be a private sector as well. Public listed का मतलब सिंपल ये होता है कि वो लिस्ट हुई हुई है स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में. Okay, and it could be any type of firm, while the public sector is actually government.
Yeah, I think you've already answered this question in our initial slide where you shared about the private sector and public sector difference.
Yeah.
So the difference is always public sector invests in the social benefit.
You can place public listed company in the private sector column as well.
Yeah. So the private sector is always looking for a financial objective, while the public sector is always looking for safeguarding public money and value for money.
Also, I would like to say that there are two types of private companies. One is private limited, second is public limited. Private limited is limited to their shareholders only. Public limited is not limited to their shareholders, original shareholders. It can be bought. Their shares can be bought by public as well through stock exchange. That is why it is called public listed, public limited, public listed. But it doesn't mean that public listed means public sector.
Yes. Any more questions? We'll wait for a couple of more minutes and then we can close the session. If you have any questions, then we can take it up. And otherwise, then we shall close the session for today. Does anyone have any more questions, please? Otherwise, then we can
share this presentation with them.
No, we'll share it. We can share it with everyone on WhatsApp.
I would like you to share the presentation with the students and all affiliated students. And I would recommend the students, particularly the students, that you should study about the public-private partnerships and public sector governance through internet. There is abundance of material there, and you can see my presentation when it will be shared with you. This will give you a snapshot of what are the PPP and how the government public sector runs its operations, which can be differentiated from the operations of the private sector.
So if no one has any questions, then we can close the session. And thank you all for attending the session. I hope you learned a lot from this. If you have any questions, do share it with us. You can drop us an email. Our customer services Karachi or office can take it up, or members you can drop it on any of our email addresses. So if you have any other queries and if you would like to give your feedback as well, please do share it with us. We'll be happy to help you out in this. And I hope you learned a lot. And if you have any queries, do share it with us. Thank you all for taking our time today, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next bridging.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.